So last week you talked about Sun Simiao. Do you want to talk more about him now?
Sun Simiao is a very powerful doctor in the Chinese medical history. So he had more than 20, the number one in the historical record. For example, he is the first one had very systematic described the virtue for clinical doctor. How can you apply virtue to serve the patients? For example, he was very detailed, but also very sincerely described because patient's disease not just but only follow the ancient books, so need to have a deep practice. It's deep cultivate to be able to really understand and the patients what's their body mind situation, what is their organs, the qi, whether there's a full or not. So, but to be able to treat patients, really save patients, and then need to have a deep knowledge and then deep understanding about what is their situation, on their spiritually and emotionally and physically. So that's why he was mentioned that if you really want to save patients, you make sure you are not treat them against the nature. For example, if people is already cold, and we call the cold symptoms, so you gave them the cold herbs or cold medicine. So that means you are not save patients, but you are added their troubles to increasing their disease and the pain. So that's why they said so their medicine in China is not just so-called physicians, is linked with to understand the heaven and the earth and how to predict it. So those are the great skill. So normally people were thinking those kind of skill only kind of immortal who can master it. So that's why the people who read the Chinese medical books, they said, okay, I studied for 3 years, so I already know so much prescriptions, so I will be able to treat the disease. But in fact, after you practice in the clinic for a while, and then you understand it's not that simple, because you really need to deeply learn about the virtue and also spirituality. So that's why he wrote that great principles systematically described what that medical virtue is about. For example, in that description, they said when the doctors who have such high virtue and also have a great skill, so they must be very calm in their mind and then very still in their spirit. So there should be no desire and no kind of no expectation. So they, before they treat patient, that they already put their will in their mind and then to helping the patient to getting to recover and get better. So this kind of compassion to helping people out of their suffering is fundamentally need to be there before the patients come to you. So that's why when the patients already come, so that's why you already set up this kind of mindset. So when you're faced with a patient, so you're not judging they are rich and then poor, and then whether they are old or young, and then they are beauty or ugly. So it's no matter whether they are the person you have the kind of a history and had a karmic bad history with those people, like anger or kind of difficulties, all the people you're getting on quite well, or your close friends, or whether there's a different, race about, you're not racial on that, or doesn't matter. You're not judging by the people whether they're stupid and then they're clever. So you treat them as equal. So every people come to the doctor, you treat them exactly as the close or compassion as you do. So you're not afraid of something wrong, and you're not thinking anything else, not anxious, or not take any kind of count, and then whether you lose some benefit or not. So that's why you need take the patients and their troubles as your own trouble. From deeply inside, you're not try to avoid the hardship or difficulties. So that means if it's the middle of night or very cold weather and very hot weather, even you are very hungry or thirsty or fatigue. So you need, in any situations, need to hold the principles. You're full-hearted to face to the patients, to helping them, to bring them out. So you're not supposed to be show you're arrogant or you're any kind of a way to kind of have a single mind, single thought about yourself or any other things. So that means you're totally living on that moment and 100% for the patients. So that is we were called the real doctor, and then the good doctor. So if you're not doing that well, so you're become a disaster for the patients because you're not truly treating them and face to them. So that's why they said from the ancient time, there's many very famous doctor to treating disease, and also use kind of animals, or they would call it, the life material. But he said from virtual part, people were thinking kind of animals is much lower than the human, but that is wrong. So that means, you're not supposed to treat the animal like this kind of arrogant. They said from their love life, the animals the same like human. So to like use some animals to benefit as a human. So that is not the virtue. So that's why he said there will be leave the Tao and live the respect life. So, like you're away from the respect life. So that's why all of the prescription he was used, he never used those animal medicine. And there are some of the animal or worm is because they use is because they already died. It's not because they killed when they were alive. So in this case, for example, the eggs, so only there's the use for the emergency. So we need to have those kind of a compassion to respect those life for the doctor to take them as kind of a medicine. So that's why when the doctor face to the people have an abscess and then the body have diarrhea and have a very, very smelly aspect. So that's this moment the doctor need to, from the deeply inside, to show the compassionate and then sincerity and then love and then care. And you're not allowed have one thought of the feel they're disgusting or look down them. So that's said that is my deep wish for all of the doctor need to be have this kind of a standard. So that's why the other part that he's mentioned about the doctor needs have a certain elegant, which is means the clean thought and then knowing how to self-reflect, self-checking. So when you were faced to the patients, so your eyes not supposed to look to the left and look to the right, and also almost like a thief. You need to avoid that. So treating patients and then very focused and to sincerely to understand what's their symptoms, what's the detail, and then check the tongues and then pose. So not allowed to have a single mistakes. So for use their prescription to make sure there's no single mistakes. Even the disease can be very difficult, but you still need to set up your mindset to save their mind as quick as possible. Especially when you're faced with patients, you're not supposed to be confused. You need very, very calm and check everything and have a deep thinking and then deep feel, because in your hands and you are holding the people's life. So totally avoid and then try to showing off your elegant or your outstanding and the mind, and then so not supposed to be showing to do something else. So to like some of the doctor to showing very, very good is to try to get the name. So that is need to be totally avoid. So because there's not compassion. So when you're getting to the patient's home, even the patient had a very rich, furniture and then, decoration. So your eyes not supposed to be look into the left and the right, and then try to observing about those material and the beautiful material. So even there's a lot of music around, your heart not supposed to be, your heart and your mind not supposed to be going outside to chasing for those beautiful music or beautiful sound. And then if there are people offer you the food, you are supposed to be eat just as normal food. Even the wine, and then they are very rich or expensive wine, so you just treated that as you haven't ever said. For those reasons, if there's a patient, they're not their whole room, they're not happy, and so there's not supposed to be patient suffering, and then you are try to enjoy yourself. So that's why you need to be with the patients all the time. So not use the patient, the painful moment, and then because people try to please doctor to be able to treat patient, to offer so much kind of a nonsense. So that's why the doctor not supposed to be sidetracked. So every good doctor, you're not supposed to be sidetracked by those kind of material. That is their fundamental, the doctor's character. Okay.
Can I
so
interject with a... Oh, go ahead.
Right.
I was going to ask a question if I could, which is, what do you think about I'm not sure if you know the common practice that's just happening in the West right now, and probably other countries too, that the more successful you are is the more patients you're treating, and the more you can get patients to come back to you by buying different treatment from you and becoming dependent on you. And yeah, what do you think of that whole situation that's happening with Chinese medicine right now in general?
Well, you see, that's one of the reasons why I'm going to describe this, the virtue principles. It's because nowadays society put a doctor as business people. So that is a disaster, because doctor is their life is to serve patients, to make sure people can out of the pain after to the suffering. So it's not for doing that for the chasing whatever the material. If so, that's not the real doctor. It's kind of a very bad virtue. So in this case, society, they cannot really treating patients because they're almost like what we call it, in China we call it like either you're a thief, you stolen the people's their wealth for your own need. So that's it's not a real doctor.
Thanks.
So in this case, if you mention that what it's doctors like that, that is called corruption. That's not real doctor.
Yeah. So part of the reason Sun Simiao set out these virtues was, do you think, is to keep ego in check, or is it to just set a certain standard? Because unless you have that virtue, then there's a chance you could be doing harm to a patient. I asked the question because I guess a lot of therapists would look at it as if, well, hey, I have to make a living and at least I'm doing some good to people. But what do you think the main reasons behind Sun Simiao setting out something like that? Do you think he encountered something in his practices which he noticed needs to be fixed? Or, yeah, what's your perception?
So my perception is because he was, even in their dynasty, in the Song dynasty, So that's also have some of the, we call the fake doctors or business doctors around. So that's why he's trying to teach and the people, and the doctor said, if you describe your doctor, you need to be truthful, need to be virtual enough. Otherwise, you will create, we call it the bad karma for you, because you're not served for the people who suffering, because people who suffering, they trust you, they come to you. Because they put their life to your hands. So that then it's great trust. Otherwise, they won't come to you. But if you manipulate this kind of trust, so that will be ruined the human relationship to each other. And there will cause nowadays we call it, the positive energy and the negative energy to create much more hatred and then doubt. So therefore, they were not very good for the earth, not very good for our environment, and especially from the conscious levels. But if the conscious levels is a mess, they will create the earth levels mess.
So part of maybe what you're saying is that the role of a Chinese medicine doctor is not just to heal people from getting sick or affecting society in different ways. It's also to be sort of like a beacon or an anchor for a certain level of consciousness, which people can come in contact to, and that maybe their role is to help facilitate that somehow. But if they don't have that virtue, then maybe there's not a chance for people to experience that. Is that something like that?
Well, because the doctor is a quite important job. In the ancient history, the doctors are almost like, we call the healer. So the healer means you can connecting with different dimensions, like from invisible, like spiritual world, and also contact with the human. So in this case, so the doctor meant to be the person who very spiritual, is like a immortal. So that's why Sun Simiao in the history, the people call him Immortal Sun. 叫孙真人, right? So that means those people who can bring the earth stable and help, and then people to learn, and then to increasing the people soul, their understanding, and then increasing the energy of the earth. So that's quite important job for the point of view of the earth balance, because in Chinese medicine, everything's yin and yang. So there's the yin world, there's the yang world. So the yin world means invisible world. The yang world is visible world. So if a doctor can be communicated in between the yin and yang, anchored this yin and yang balance, which is fundamentally to help the earth and also different, the ecosystem and the life, different life form to be able to work or living harmonious together. So that's kind of a simply doctor's job. Looks like treating the patient. But why the doctor is so important, need to have good virtue, is because if people getting sick, so that means their energy is already out of balance. So the doctor's job, through getting people to have a much better yin and yang balance life. That means you don't get sick, or you're sick, you're getting better. So that means each person have a balance. So they will influence their, those life around us, or even can influence the ecosystem around the human. But if a human totally out of balance, for example, like the pandemic, if people mentally out of balance, there are so much protests, and there are so much fear and anger. So that's why the qi and the blood, it is get upset. So that's why people get sick. When the people get sick, they lost their life. That means if without life, so our earth is also and then affected. So depends, of course, what I mean. Without human, the earth still carry on because the earth, they have their own life. But on the other hand, human affected the earth, but the earth affected human. So human rely on the earth. So that's why we said why we need respect heaven and the earth. So the doctor, who is the great healers, not just only healing the patient and the human patient, but it's through the healing the human, but also to help to keep the balance for their ecosystem of the earth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's maybe part of the problem perhaps is that what's happened in recent times, or you said it also happened in the past, is that perhaps doctors are defining themselves by what their role is in society, but to be that conduit between yin and yang, you have to look at your role from a cosmic perspective, or maybe like a non-dualistic perspective, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why, when you hear what he described, this doctor's virtue. So his standard almost like when you will face the patients, you're emerging from your own small cosmos as your human, right? And then emerging with the big cosmos, because you're not have a duality in the yang. You're balanced. You're no thoughts. You only have one sense, is to experience the patients and how to shift their yin yang unbalance into the balance. Right. Yeah. So I think that is why the Sun Simiao is very, very famous doctor among the Chinese medicine history, because in the Taoist temples in Beijing, Baiyunguan, and have a huge them flag, the writing above his virtue, principles, writing in the temples. So it's like to teach people. So what is really means, what is the true doctors is about.